begin.
Okay, this is the book that I'm talking about. It's called From Strength to Strength, Finding Success, Happiness, and Deep Purpose in the Second Half of Life. And the author, Arthur Brooks, writes a column, a very popular column in the Atlantic magazine called How to Build a Life. And I really like his writing, so I was attracted to this book. And so he talks about, in the first half of life, so many people are striving, but he talks about the striver's curse. People who strive to be excellent at what they do often find their inevitable decline really terrifying, and they don't want to give up what they're doing. But he has this kind of depressing first chapter where he talks about, it's inevitable that you will decline. And he talks about some famous scientists, Charles Darwin, who became very famous and was treated, everyone considered him such a brilliant scientist early in his career. And as he got older and he didn't have any of those discoveries, he was very depressed. And the reason Arthur Brooks wrote this book is he was on a late night plane, and behind him, when it was dark and everybody was asleep, a wife was telling her husband, "Oh, quit saying that you wish you were dead." And this man is saying, "Well, nobody cares about me anymore." And he was like, "Oh, okay, this is just someone who's, not accomplished anything and he's getting older." Well, when the lights came on and they deplaned, he turned around and it was someone who was very famous and very accomplished. And people leaving the plane recognized this man and said, "Oh, you've been an inspiration to me." And so the man started smiling. So he said, "Wow, if someone who is this accomplished and this well-known can feel this way, is this something that happens to everyone?" So he calls it striver's curse. And he says, there is another path. Instead of denying change in your abilities, you can make the change itself a source of strength. Instead of trying to avoid decline, you can transcend it by finding a new form of success. So he says there are three doors. As you're facing your decline and looking at it, there are three doors you can go through. You can deny the facts and rage against decline, setting yourself up for frustration and disappointment. You can shrug and give in to decline and experience your aging as an unavoidable tragedy. Or you can accept that what got you to this point won't work to get you into the future, that you need to build some new strengths and skills. And I will tell you, from a personal point of view, I retired earlier than I had planned. I was the head of technology for the Spring School District. We got a new superintendent. He wanted all the top jobs to go to his cronies, and they had a plan for getting rid of me. And so I worked out my 2-year contract and accepted the fact that I needed to retire because they were going to eliminate my position. And so it took me, I was unhappy for 2 years because my identity was, I'm the chief technology officer at Spring ISD. And so that was my identity. And all of a sudden I lost that identity and I lost my department. We had about 30 people and we were this big family and everybody, loved, we accomplished so much. And that, like I say, that was my identity. There was a statewide organization. I've been president of it. And, I didn't even want to go to their meetings because I was just, it was really hard. And so it definitely makes you understand that, so that's one reason why I wanted to read this book. So, but he talks about, though, there's fluid intelligence, which is the solving of problems, discovering things that you get in your first half of life. In your second half of life, they talk about crystallized intelligence, where it's wisdom, it's your past experiences and being able to so they talk about some people who were very successful who become teachers, or someone who is, helping students. And all of a sudden they realize, oh, they care about my experience and my knowledge, and your vocabulary is really full. And so that it's really good to be a mentor or an advisor, a teacher, as you're getting older. So one of the best things in the book is one of his examples of someone who embraced the second curve is J.S. Bach. So isn't that awesome? So I learned more about Bach than I knew. And so he was considered this brilliant a writer, and he also was considered, a brilliant performer. But he was, he had 20 children. I also didn't know that. He had 20 children, 7 with his first wife and 13 with his second wife. His first wife died. But one of his sons became more popular than him. And his son was Carl Philipp Emanuel, known as CPE. And he started, so as Bach was getting older here, his son was becoming much more popular. And so CPE displaced Bach as the family's musical celebrity. But Bach could have become embittered, but he wasn't. He took pride in his son's originality and redesigned his own life, moving from musical innovator to master teacher. He spent the last 10 years of his life working on a collection of fugues and canons based on a single theme, intended to teach the compositional technique of the Baroque, and it was called The Art of the Fugue. And it was written as a kind of textbook. 100 years after Bach's death, it was rediscovered and began to be performed in public. Today, it is common to hear it in concerts. Imagine a textbook so beautiful that it is considered a work of literature or even poetry. That's the greatness of J.S. Bach, that he wrote this as a gift to future generations, and it was rediscovered, and his greatness was rediscovered. And he wasn't bitter, and he was happy about his son. So he says, think back to what we said about Charles Darwin. On paper, the two great men are similar. Both were preternaturally gifted and attained fame for early innovations and accomplishments. Both enjoyed tremendous respect, even after their earlier innovations were taken over. And both attained permanent fame well after their deaths. Where they differ is in the management of their own lives and their approach to their midlife professional decline as innovators. When Darwin hit his wall, he became despondent and depressed. His life ended in sadness. Like most people, he never looked for or found that second curve that this gentleman talks about. So all he saw late in life was his decline. When Bach saw the back half of his fluid intelligence curve, he jumped with both feet onto the crystallized intelligence curve and never looked back. When he fell behind as an innovator, he reinvented himself as an instructor. He died beloved, fulfilled, and respected, if not as famous as he once had been, but happy. So he changed his skills, and his life was filled with joy, love, and service to others. So one of the things so we get to the next chapter, which I was telling some of you earlier, is my favorite chapter in the book because it talks about St. Thomas Aquinas, the Buddha, and Mick Jagger. And it's wonderful that you can put all three of them in one chapter. But St. Thomas Aquinas and the Buddha were very similar in that they were both born into very wealthy families, and they both rejected the material goods. And so, St. Thomas Aquinas says that there are idols that objectify them and that there's this craving for happiness, and there are these 4 parts to it that we crave and want to attach ourselves to: money, power, pleasure, and honor. And so the honor part, you know, you go, where does that come from? Well, that was my problem. I had this self-identity of, oh, I'm this important person. And that's what happened to that man at the beginning of the book, who was, you know, I might as well be dead. No one cares about me anymore. But when you get, you know, some of the accolades. And so, but then the same thing with Buddha. And Buddha was very clear where he said, this chapter is all about attachment to things. And they rejected that. And the Buddha said, it's not the things, it's your attachment to them. And so I have a very good friend whose father just died. And that's something they've been going through, is there were so many things in the house. And so many people, you know, think that they need to collect things. And one of his ways of finding happiness and pursuit in the second half of life is letting go of your attachment to things. And it's not just material things, but it's that honor where you're thinking that, oh, people respect me because I do this. And if I'm not doing this anymore, I've lost that. And you need to say, no, there are other things that will bring you happiness. And if you have anyone in your family who's a hoarder or close to a hoarder, you understand that attachment does not bring happiness. So these are the noble truths from the Buddha. Life is suffering due to chronic dissatisfaction. The cause of this suffering is craving, desire, and attachment for worldly things. Suffering can be defeated by eliminating this craving, the desire, and attachment. Come on in. And the noble truth number 4, the way to eliminate craving, desire, and attachment is by following the noble path, you know, the Buddhist path. And so it says, note that neither Thomas nor the Buddha argue that there is something inherently evil about worldly rewards. In fact, they can be used for great good. Money is critical for a functioning society and supporting your family. But as attachments, the focus of our life's attention and as ends instead of a means, the problem is they cannot bring us the deep satisfaction that we require, that we desire. So we chase our worldly attachments up our first success curve, that first curve. We work ourselves to death to attain the elusive satisfaction. When the success curve starts to bend back down, the attachments give us tremendous suffering. So he says, it only took a couple of millennia, but popular culture and modern social science finally caught up with the wisdom of the Siddhartha and Thomas Aquinas, and they can help us understand the attachment problem even better. Says if you know only one song by the Rolling Stones, it's probably their big 1965 mega hit, I Can't Get No Satisfaction. So he said, it states a truth about life. Somewhere deep in our lizard brains, way below our level of consciousness, satisfaction is defined by a simple equation. Satisfaction equals getting what you want. And he says, but deeply satisfying, maybe for a couple of days at most. And then that's the real problem. The song really should have been titled, I Can't Keep No Satisfaction. So he says it's almost as if our brains won't let us enjoy anything for very long. So he says what we really should make, he keeps changing that equation. Satisfaction equals continually getting what you want. So that's where, and he says, I saw a cartoon some years ago of a man on his deathbed telling his grieving loved ones, I wish I'd bought more crap. It says, successful people often keep working to increase their wealth, accumulating far beyond anything they could possibly spend, and more than they want to bequeath. One day I asked a wealthy friend why this is so. His answer was, they have gotten rich. They know how to measure their self-worth only in material terms. So they hope at some point they will finally feel truly successful, happy, and thus ready to die. But it never works. So he says, also, we tend to compare ourselves to other people. Hasn't social media made that really bad? But people did that before. So another definition of success is continually having more than others. And so for a number of people, that's, on your treadmill, you're not just pursuing something in a grand exercise of futility. Something is pursuing you too. Failure. You don't want to fail. So failure equals having less. So that goes back to the attachments. You want the attachments because that shows I'm successful. It says that makes evolutionary sense, but it makes no sense in modern life to use our energies to have 5 cars, 5 bathrooms, or even 5 shirts, but we just want them. So he says, to sum up, here are the 3 formulas that explain our impulses and the reason we can't ever seem to achieve lasting satisfaction. Satisfaction equals continually getting what you want. Success equals continually having more than others. And failure equals having less. So that makes us chase our worldly rewards to ever greater heights. In our hearts, we know that this isn't true. Even with this knowledge, the problem seems unsolvable. But he says, if you're ready to manage your wants, to start chipping away. And I think that's something as we retire, we start to realize, that I started looking at my stuff and I'm like, will my grandsons ever care about this? Will they ever want this? And you need to start letting go instead of acquiring more. So just y'all feel the same way? I see some nodding of heads that yes, that,
There's these traps out there too. Like, I'm at this point where I'm ready to do this transition. Mm-hmm. I'd be happy to change.
Jump on that second curve.
Change how much money and stuff we have, But now I got kids starting college, and the only way to do it now is because I'm looking for another job because I sold out of my company. I don't know what I'm going to do that, right? So, but the colleges, they look at our asset portfolio, okay, you can afford this. And I'm like, oh, not these other jobs I want to have. So it's really,
yes,
you get these points where being smart got me into a bad spot because I accumulated enough to be able to have some choice, and now I'm gonna have to delay a choice for a while, maybe.
Yes.
So.
Right. So, but this was really interesting. He got an email from a 50-something-year-old woman, professionally very successful, who struggled with attachments. But then she got a wake-up call from her dead father. I no longer feel the need, and here's what she wrote. I no longer feel the need to surround myself with stuff, especially after my father died in his house and the paramedics almost couldn't reach him because his house was so full of stuff. This was a great lesson to learn. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was, really, really, it says people don't realize their unhealthy attachments in life until they suffer a loss or illness that makes them, makes the important things come in into their lives. So he talks about the reverse bucket list. He said a second way to get started on chipping away is to look at the counsel we get that is making us into dissatisfied people. For example, self-help gurus often give the advice to make an inventory of the bucket list and review it every birthday. And he's saying, do a reverse bucket list. What can I give away this year? What can I give up this year? And so he says, what he does, he confronts us about each item. I say, this is not evil, but it will not bring me the happiness and peace I seek. And I simply don't have time to make it my goal. I choose to detach myself from this. And so he says, doing that type of reverse bucket list definitely, you know, helps. So, but he says, let me say one good thing about the conventional bucket list, however. It makes us focus on the limits of time and thus on how to use time well. The idea of the bucket list is to make sure you don't get to the end and say, I'm not ready to die. I've never ridden in a hot air balloon. He said, I didn't just make this up. That's number 6 on the average bucket list. So it's not on my bucket list. So, but he says, death is the most normal, natural thing in life itself. And yet we are amazingly adroit at acting as if it were abnormal and a big surprise. When I tell my graduate students who are mostly in their late 20s to contemplate the fact that they have 50 or 60 Thanksgivings left and 20 or 30 with their parents, they look pretty shocked. And so he says, planning for the end is our challenge, that we need to think about our death. And so understanding the fear of demise. And so, and trying to think about your legacy and decline. And, you know, so he says, consider meditating on the end. And here are some of his following. He mindfully envisions each of the following states. I feel my competence declining. Those close to me begin to notice that I'm not as sharp as I used to be. Other people receive the social and professional attention I used to receive. I have to decrease my workload and step back from daily activities I once completed with ease. I am no longer able to work. Many people I meet do not recognize me or know me for my previous work. That was me. I am still alive, but professionally, I am no one. I lose the ability to communicate my thoughts and ideas to those around me. I am dead. I am no longer remembered for all my accomplishments. So, I mean, that's a pretty tough thing to look at, but you look at it and you say, you know, we need to be focusing on, you know what, the end may be closer than we think. And are we mentally and emotionally ready? And so, so anyway, so are y'all liking this?
Yes,
Does it seem like a book that
so
you like?
practical.
Yeah. So,
Yes, Marianne, we were late. What is the title of the book?
okay, here's the book. It's called From Strength to Strength,
Oh, okay.
Finding Success, Happiness, and Deep Purpose in the Second Half of Life. And so for those of you who just got here, he talks about the first half of life. We're competing and we want to be tops at what we do. And we want to be successful and we want to buy things. But in the second half of life, we need to start giving those things away. That if you just say I'm successful only because I own things or people recognize me, all of those things, no, you need to, you know, I'll give you an example. With the pandemic, and I'm a people person, and I have to get out and go somewhere every day because I need people, and I meet a friend for coffee. But with the pandemic and everything, and we had to stop that for a while, I needed to get out, and I live not too far from Brace Bayou. And I started feeding the ducks, those Muscovy ducks who love people. And so I've been feeding them now like 2 years. And so it's so funny now, I'll be walking with my bag of, and I get them the HEB super sweet corn. Oh my gosh, they love that stuff. And I get them several things that are good for them. But like, there were 2 guys jogging ahead of me and I'm walking along and the ducks see me and they're like, and the ones who can't fly are like, and the ones that are some flying, they're like dive bombing me. You know, they're like, whoa, come on, we want food, we want food. And the guys turned around and they're like, man, they really like you. And so, but there's also, I tell myself, he talks about gratitude. And I think gratitude is such an important thing. And a lot of times when I'm walking, especially when it's not 105 degrees outside, but when I'm walking there along the bayou, I tell myself, I'm so grateful that there's this beautiful place to walk close to where I live, you know, and I can enjoy nature. And you see, and I love watching the ducks fly, you know, and so I remind myself about gratitude. Or when I walk my dog super early in the morning, I remind myself, I look at the stars, I look at the moon, and I say, I'm so grateful that I can still walk, you know, that we have this. And so gratitude, you know, is really, really important as part of the second part of life. So,
Marianne, you might catch some. I think it's important to understand also for the folks that the different intelligences that he talked about.
Oh,
so
okay, right.
Sexual difference.
Okay, he talked about there are two different intelligences. There's fluid intelligence, which you tend to have in the first part of life. When you're younger, that's when you're discovering things. That's when you're doing innovative. That's when a lot of tech entrepreneurs create their companies. How many of them do as much later on? But and so that's fluid intelligence. And then in the second half of life, it's crystallized intelligence, where it's taking your experiences and your knowledge, your wisdom. And then sometimes people tend to be mentors, they tend to be teachers, they can be historians, but you usually don't get that many of the older Nobel Prize winners. Usually those discoveries are with the fluid intelligence. So he talks about, you know, enjoying and appreciating and finding things to do with your crystallized intelligence. So and if you missed it, he had a great, where he talks about giving up your attachment to things. And he quotes St. Thomas Aquinas, the Buddha, and then Mick Jagger. I can't get no satisfaction. It's my favorite chapter. My favorite chapter. So having seen the Stones twice. So anyway, but he talks. So there's the gratitude he said the Dalai Lama told him, you're only 1 in 7 billion, you know. And, you know, have some humility, you know, but also that you need to pursue that. Oftentimes a pursuit in the second half of life is finding your spirituality. And so it's also, you know, understanding that there's a reason why faith rises often as we age. So let's see if so he says, researchers sometimes half-heartedly speculate on why people who embrace faith, it's a joyful epiphany. After many years in this field, I believe these things are true. The best explanation for the happiness bump is far simpler. When you spend serious time and effort focused on transcendental things, it puts your little world into proper context and takes the focus off yourself. Most of our days, I'm thinking, me, me, me. It's like watching the same dreary television show over and over all day long. It's so boring. Faith forces me into the cosmos to consider the source of truth, the origin of life, and the good of others. This focus brings refreshment and relief. So, and it says, a common question I get is whether this higher focus must be religious or spiritual. Say, can it be, say, an interest in philosophy? Of course, the answer is yes. So a perfect example is the growing interest today among young people in ancient Greek thinking, specifically Epicurean and Stoic philosophy. But he says, if you're in a transitional state in your life and find your interest in the transcendental growing, you are right on schedule. Don't resist. So I thought that was a really, really good point. The spiritual, the spiritual aspects of it. And when he's talking about the Dalai Lama, he says, when saying I'm one of 7 billion, he does not mean that I'm insignificant or just like everyone else. He is encouraging me to zoom out from my narrow, earthbound perspective on my life, my work, my relationships, my money. So, and he says, when you take that walk, envision yourself as one of 7 billion people existing briefly on a timeline lasting millions of years from the past into the future. I consider the insignificance not of my life, but of the worldly details with which I usually distract myself from metaphysical truths. I think, for example, how truly trivial it would be in the broad scheme of things if I lost my smartphone or dented my car. So I thought that was a really, really good point. And he says, and he talks about the gratitude walk, the practice of focusing on the positive events in your life while walking, helping you to savor happiness by amplifying gratitude. I practiced this all throughout the coronavirus lockdowns around my neighborhood nightly after dinner. And so that's how I feel about the ducks. So he said, when we think of our identities as fixed and unchanging, I am this kind of person, I am not that kind of person, we're shutting ourselves off from many of life's possibilities. Being open to reevaluating our ideas about ourselves can keep us from getting stuck in patterns that aren't true to our changing selves. What I presented here shows that when it comes to faith, many people do change with age. Allowing that change to happen and developing our inner life helps us get onto that second curve. So it's a new source of strength needed to jump to the crystallized intelligence curve. So he talks about St. Paul. And so it says, Paul is the inventor of Christianity as an organized religion, is how he sees it, which has grown for 2,000 years and today has more than 2 billion followers. So he says, so what was Paul's entrepreneurial secret? Here it is in his own words from the letter to the startup Christian church in Corinth in about AD 55. I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded with the Lord to take it away from me, but he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, and difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. It says, Paul says that this weakness is the source of his strength. This is a man whose force of will and oratorical gifts brought in many thousands of converts, yet he was claiming his true strength was his torment. And they're thinking he was really talking about physical deterioration, but they're not sure, So the secret to going from strength to strength, from that fluid intelligence to the crystallized intelligence, the secret is to going from strength to strength is to recognize that your weaknesses, your loss, your decline can be a gift to you and others. So that, and I think, Christ the King offers many opportunities for people to find that gift. So anyway, and it says, Brené Brown, isn't she a professor at U of H? In her best-selling book, Daring Greatly, How the Courage to be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Parent, and Lead, Brown talks about making ourselves vulnerable to others if we really want to be happy and successful. That walling ourselves off hurts us. Another way to understand her point is that, as we all know, defensiveness is a terrible quality and never helps us. The right goal is defenselessness. So the lesson is that if you want to make a deep human connection with someone, your strengths and worldly successes won't cut it. You need your weaknesses for that. If I had gone to a fancy college, it might impress people, but it wouldn't establish a connection with most of them, because he ended up doing an online degree. So he says, let's go back to St. Paul. From our current perspective, it's pretty easy to see Paul as one of the great winners in history. As such, it's nearly impossible to imagine Paul as a man in decline. Yet that is almost certainly how he saw himself. Near the end of his life, Paul wrote letters from a prison cell to churches that seemed to be fragmenting. He felt abandoned by his friends. And then as his first defense, no one came to my support, but everyone deserted me. His only hope appeared to be in the hereafter. The Lord will rescue me from every evil attack and will bring me safely to his kingdom, heavenly kingdom. Notwithstanding his faith, Paul must have seen his earthly work as a failure. But what we see today, at least 2 billion Christians do, would have been unimaginable to him. But says there are 2 obvious lessons here. First is, I've been emphasizing, it doesn't matter who you are. If you live long enough, you will see the decline of your fluid intelligence. Second, you never really know what kind of impact your work will have. There's no telling. But there's a more important lesson. It was Paul's very sadness about worldly events while maintaining his faith that has attracted people for thousands of years. So it was his words of sadness and suffering at the end of his life that magnetized the Christian faith for the ages as one of authentic human experience. So he says, so ask yourself, what type of person do you want to be? One who declines with seeming indifference while suffering privately, or one who, like Paul, acknowledges loss openly and yet maintains faith, believes in the power of love, and continues to serve others? Your decline, as painful as it is, should be experienced and shared. And he says, so let me just, to go to the end, he says, going from strength to strength requires a new set of life skills. We need to adopt a new formula. But of course, you are unlikely to memorize all of this book. So he says, I put it into 7 words. Use things. Don't attach yourself, but use things. Love people. Worship the divine. So that's 7 words. Use things, love people, worship the divine. So he says, before I finish, it occurs to me, you might be wondering what happened to the man on the plane. So there was a man, this started the whole book, a man who, when you look at him, you knew it was someone very famous and very accomplished, but he was telling his wife, I wish I were dead. Nobody cares about me anymore, because he was getting older and suffering decline. He's still pretty famous, popping up on the news from time to time, although less each year. He is very old. Early on, when I saw a news story about him, I would feel a flash of something like pity, but which I now realize was really only a refracted sense of terror about my own future. Poor guy really meant I'm screwed. But as my grasp of the right formula and the lessons in this book has deepened, my fear has disappeared. I was thinking that I really should put him in the acknowledgement section of his book. My feeling toward him is one of gratitude for what he taught me, although inadvertently. He set me on a path that has changed my life. First, I did the research to expose the sources of misery among so many people who are life's winners, misery for which I was surely destined. Second, he set in motion a series of life changes that I would never have made otherwise. Third, I was able to enumerate the secrets to making these changes and share them with you. In truth, the man on the plane is who I have to thank for allowing me to be happy and fulfilled for the rest of my life, whether that is 2 years or 40. I will go to my grave without revealing his identity. However, he will be in my thoughts every day. My hope is that before his time comes, he will find peace and joy. And I hope you will too. May you go from strength to strength. See, I think that's, y'all like the book? I really liked it. I really liked it. I think there are so many of us who are at this part of our lives where we look back and it just gives you some things to think about. Definitely some things. Yes, Naomi.
I have a couple observations. I do read Arthur Brooks and like him very much. he wrote this, he's in his late 50s.
Mhm.
And some of you know Ezekiel Emanuel, the physician, who also in his late 50s made the announcement that at the end of life, he didn't want any life-saving equipment because his parents were going through that and so forth. So my point is, because I am the oldest old now in our society, I think we almost have three. We don't have two paths. We don't have early and middle. We have three pathways of life. I'm in the oldest old. And I do think that people change a lot from their 50s to their late 70s and their early 80s. And so it's just an observation of the social scientists who are really contributing a lot. I'm not disputing what they're contributing, but they have not really walked the walk yet about what it's like to live 85 or 90. I'm not that old, but I'm getting there. So it's just an observation to think of. I think it's really easy when you're healthy and your mind is good and you're not even facing any chronic illness to write books like this. I credit him a lot. He writes so much about happiness also.
Yes. Yes.
And then just one other observation, you know, J.S. Bach lived to be 65. And your example said the last 10 years of life, he sort of used his crystallized intelligence, which means kind of he stopped at 55. Well, for someone my age, 55 is young. 55 is young.
Yeah, but
Now,
for him, for his
but
time.
for his time, right. But I
Right.
do understand that, you know, anyway, it's just a couple observations.
Linda, I know how much you love Bach. There's a whole great story about Bach in here.
Oh, really?
You would
Wow. Wow.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted a little more information about the author.
He is a, what's interesting is that his first career was playing the French horn, and he played it as that was his job, you know, that was his career. And he lost his skills. And he secretly started going to school and studying social sciences, and he became a social scientist. And for 10 years, he was the head of he's a libertarian.
Right.
And he served for 10 years as president of the American Enterprise Institute. But then he realized that he needed to make that career change, that was kind of a fast treadmill, and it was time to get off and do some other things. And so he's a professor at Harvard, and he's a social scientist. So his name is Arthur Brooks. And so he writes for The Atlantic, their How to Build a Life column. And so he, you know, I think it's important to talk to us about our capacity for happiness, because I don't know if you have people in your family, I have people in my family who have no capacity for happiness. And it's really hard. And I have to like hide my happiness sometimes because it depresses my sister when I tell her something good has happened to me. And it's really, really hard. And she's very depressive. But she's been that way her whole life. She's never been happy. And I visited with my mother, who's 100, about to turn 101. Whoa. She's in a nursing home. And she said, I wish I could make Betty happy. She's just not happy. But it's been that way her whole life, you know? And so, so this is really, you know, so this really also rang true for me about that, because it's important to seek that happiness, to go feed those ducks. Even though it's hot right now, I go feed those ducks, you know, and exactly.
You make them happy.
I do. But, you know, or my dogs, you know, walking them every morning. And one of my dogs is about to turn 11, and he still, as I'm taking that breakfast out to the dog room, he jumps for joy that I'm feeding him, you know? And I'm like, if you can do this at 11, you know, that's pretty good. And he still competes in a dog sport, you know, at 11 years old, and he's still happy with that. And so, you know, it's people are different, but I think seeking that spiritual, the gratitude, you know, and I still haven't learned. I'll see people here who haven't seen me in a while. Well, what are you doing these days? you know, and it's hard to answer that question when you're retired, you know,
Right.
and,
Yeah.
you know, and you try to give some examples and, you know, I'm very fortunate to have 3 wonderful grandsons and I spend a lot of time with them, but, you know, it's not like saying, well, I'm still the technology director. It's very nice to, you know, it's that, you know, so that was, you know, that really rang true with me. So I highly recommend the book. I think it's a pretty easy book to read, but he's got a lot of good examples, and the Bach part is really good. Yes, ma'am.
I want to introduce everybody in this room, because everybody in here are very dear friends. My 2 friends from Randolph-Macon Women's College are here for a week with me.
Oh.
Well, all 3 of us have been widowed,
Oh.
and
Recently.
recently. Mariana Anderson Bush is emeritus professor of chemistry at Baylor. And she and her husband were both in the chemistry department. They were recruited when they got their PhDs and spent their career there. But at one point, Mariana was head of the department. I think it's terrific. Mariana's parents and my parents lived not far from one another in New York. So they were very, very dear friends, even long after we were out of college and so forth. So it's wonderful. Marilyn Lindgren is from Austin. And I knew her since the first day of Randolph-Macon Women's College in the orientation class, because we had both said we were interested in dance. We were assigned to, our mentor was the head of the dance department. And so I literally knew her from first day of freshman year. She is an amazing linguist. She spent time in Spain. She's bilingual book publisher in New York and also in Austin. She also is an amazing yoga guru. I'm talking like certifications coming up because so it's wonderful to have them here and talking about looking over your life, because I mean we're talking like 60 years, you know, since we were teen boppers. And so it's really, we've had a wonderful time sharing and remembering it. Some things one person will remember and the other person, oh no, that was Professor so-and-so, you know, so it's really good. And because we went to a women's college, it's a small women's college, 750 maybe there when we were there, you know, 600 or, yeah. So it was a small college and you couldn't hide from the professors because it was like having your parent, you know, they knew when you weren't doing well in that class. So yeah, it was an amazing experience. So we were very, very fortunate. So it's interesting looking back on your life and how much you can still relate to people that were friends of yours, either in college or, you know, friends when you were really little, cousins and so forth that maybe you were closer to. But literally everybody in this room are very dear friends and have given me a lot of support over this last year. So it's been great. Yeah.
Well, and here too, Linda, you can't see our folks online.
Oh,
we
right, okay.
We have a whole, more friends of yours
Right,
here.
more friends.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah.
So, well, thank y'all for being so attentive, and I'm glad y'all liked the book, and I thought it was, you know, a topic that a lot of us were interested in. So,
obviously, he's not Lutheran though, right?
no, he's Catholic.
He probably would have pointed out that Luther went the other direction from Bach. Luther was very angry in his older age and did not handle that aging transition very well at all. And in fact, wrote a lot of things that scholars have to figure out, do we really want to even include this in the Luther canon or not? Because it's so contrary. It seems like it comes from a place of anger instead of a place of where he was before.
Well, again, he had great success at an early age.
Well, he was famous. He was the most famous professor in
the world,
probably.
And so we have to, you know, understand that sometimes those things we have to let go of them. And
he had ailing health as well.
dementia.
Could be. He definitely had a lot of like gout and you know, aging, a lot of problems with aging in terms of physical health too. So I don't think you ever really get it often.
Right.
He wasn't that old.
No, it was late 50s, I think, or early 60s.
Yeah. So, Beverly, do you know who's going to be next week?
Let's
Oh.
see, we,
Okay.
thank you.
And I'll pick up on all these other things because mine is on the invisible kingdom, and reimagining chronic illness. And it's about those people who are not finding success and are disappearing from society because of chronic illness. It's tied into the COVID, long COVID.
Okay. Okay. But that sounds really interesting.
So that's next week.
Next week, yes.
We have to switch.
Thank you, Mary Ann, for filling in at the very last minute. And then there was this great collaboration. Thank you for doing all that while I was on vacation. Out of it. I love that community. So Vicki is taking next week, and then Carolyn, who was originally, is doing August 21 or something.
Yes.
We will revise.
And each hitter, you're batting 1,000. That's wonderful. And you brought in at the end about gratitude, and I have been neglecting any discipline of expressing gratitude. Then this morning, as our late friend, Daniel Johnson, the Buddhist husband of Luann Novak, got me into a habit of listening to a wonderful radio program called On Being at 6 a.m. Sunday. It's coming to an end and I need to stay connected somehow. But I thought, you know, I know Luann is in immediate grief right now, since it's only been a few weeks since Daniel's death.
David. Yeah.
Excuse me, David's death. And I thought, you know, I need to let her know how thankful we are. And so I'm trying to develop a habit of note writing in such instances, not just for consolation to people, but when they're doing a good job. I think of Daniel Zorn, the work he has put into this transition of the transition committee, and on and on. So thank you, Mary Ann, for giving me a list. I'm a list maker. I don't always do them all, but I have a list. Thank you.
I will tell you the thank you to on my grandson's baseball team. There was a 12-year-old who got hit playing in another game, and it injured his spleen, and he was at the hospital for a week, and he didn't really know me, but I wrote him and I said, I love watching you play baseball. You know, I'm Luke's grandmother. He sent me a thank you and said, you made my day, you know, and I carry that in my purse, you know, it just, you know, and so, yes, Bridget, the writing of thank yous, you know, the old fashioned way, you know, is not such a bad thing. So you've been,
I do, but I have to add, I got the loveliest thank you note in the mail from Bridget, which I treasure. Did he talk about doing things for others? You said doing things for yourself, but maybe that's around all of this stuff. I just went, and maybe it's too late to bring that up.
No, he talks about, you know, finding purpose, and oftentimes that purpose is helping others, and so that, you know, it's not about your own glory, it's about, you know, helping other people. So he does give examples of that.
And I read an Atlantic article where he wrote not as good a summary, but a short summary about this topic. It was probably right as it was being published, because I'm sure it's promotional in that sense. But he in there he specifically mentioned that the career transition is that the glory passes from you to your mentees, and helping them be successful becomes the point, right? And that their appreciation is all you need at that point, kind of thing. The idea of like using your wisdom to help others be successful.
So.
I think I heard you use the expression giving back. Did I imagine that? I don't know. But I think that that's what we do when we reach a certain age, of the feeling that we need to give back in some way. And that's the helping other people and the expressing the gratitude through acts.
Or just acts of kindness. I try to, you know, sometimes I might see someone and they've got on a really nice outfit, and it's not someone who's tall and skinny, you know, but they look really good. And I tell them, I'll walk up to a stranger and say, I love those shoes, or I love that top you've got on. And this one lady, she's like, oh my gosh, you made my day. And I always say, we just need more kindness in this world, you know, and I do think.
I was working the register at my friend's restaurant. First day it was cold, and all the ladies were showing up in their sweaters. And I got so much mileage out of, I really like your favorite sweater because I know it's your favorite. So you pulled out your favorite sweater on the first cold day. They're like, oh, it is my favorite.
Noticing.
Yeah.
Attention.
Well, of course, I'm looking at their sweater. I mean, they're standing right in front of me to catch her. So it's pretty easy to.
Right. Yeah. But I know Sergio he introduced at the contemplative worship where we would meditate on a word. And so that next week I said, do you know what word I'm meditating on? And he's like, and I said, gratitude. Because we tend to ask God for things, but we don't say thank you for what we've got. And he was like, oh, I'm going to borrow that, you know. So, but it's true. The whole gratitude thought I thought was really important. So for those of you who don't ever go to contemplative worship, let me tell you, it's a beautiful experience. And, you know, I think last night we had 18 people, so it'd be nice to get a few more folks to come, and especially in the fall when it's dark and that candles are on, it's so beautiful. It's a spiritual experience. So, okay, I think we're done.
Thank you, Mary Ann. Thank you, and thank you all. See you all next week.
Okay, I'm going to check now on the baseball game.
I'm not sure that's a good idea.
I'm afraid they may have lost.